You wake up, but your body doesn't. You try to scream, nothing. There's something in the room, it's watching you, and it's getting closer. This isn't a nightmare. It's worse than a nightmare because you're awake and you can't move. All over the world, people describe the same thing: a heavy weight on the chest, a shadowy figure in the doorway, breathing that isn't yours. For centuries, it was called a curse, a demon, a punishment for sins. In Africa, it's a devil riding your back. In Japan, kanashibari, bound by invisible chains. In Scandinavia, a witch pressing down in the night. In modern America, a sleep disorder. But what if it's more than that? It was standing over me. It had red eyes. I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. Over 8% of the population will experience it in their lifetime, but most never speak about it. Until now. What happens when your mind wakes up, but your body doesn't? Sleep paralysis is not rare. It affects millions of people across continents, cultures, and centuries. And yet, most never speak about it. You lie in bed, unable to move. You feel fully conscious. Your chest is heavy, your breath shallow, and somewhere in the room, a presence, watching, waiting. Some people see a dark silhouette. Others describe a pressure on their chest like something sitting on top of them. Many feel a sense of pure terror, not fear of a dream, but of something real, present, malevolent. It's often dismissed as a trick of the mind, a glitch in the transition between REM sleep and wakefulness. The brain awakens before the body does. That's the explanation. But what if that's only half the story? Because the same hallucinations appear across cultures that never communicated. In Japan, it's called kanashibari. In Newfoundland, the old hag. In Nigeria, devil on your back. In ancient Greece, people believed it was a demon. In medieval Europe, a witch. Different names, same experience, same fear. Why would unrelated people, separated by oceans and centuries, all describe the same thing? What if sleep paralysis isn't just a neurological error? What if it's something older, something that's been waiting? For centuries, humans have tried to explain the darkness that comes for them in sleep. Long before science offered neural misfires or REM disruptions, people gave names to the shadows. They weren't symptoms. They were stories. And those stories have survived. In Japan, the kanashibari was thought to be the work of vengeful spirits or curses. Victims described being pinned down by invisible hands, unable to move, while a malevolent force hovered nearby. Sometimes they would wake with bruises, convinced it wasn't a dream. In Scandinavia, the nightmare had a name: mare. Not just a bad dream, but a demon who would sit on a sleeper's chest, suffocating them slowly. It wasn't fiction. It was feared. Entire rituals were built to keep it away. Iron under pillows, prayers whispered before bed. In West Africa and the Caribbean, the phenomenon became tied to folklore, involving witches and ancestral spirits. Victims often believed someone had cursed them, that their soul was being held hostage between worlds. The experience wasn't private, it was cultural, something everyone understood, even if no one could stop it. These myths weren't random. They formed patterns. Across continents, people described the same sensations: immobility, pressure, fear, and a presence. Always the presence. Different names, same fear. Different legends, same shadow. How is it that unconnected civilizations created nearly identical descriptions of a sleep state horror? Some anthropologists suggest a shared biological experience, a cross-cultural response to the brain waking before the body. But others believe it points to something deeper, that these myths endure not because they're convenient explanations, but because they resonate with a primal truth. Sleep paralysis isn't just frightening. It feels intentional. It feels personal, like something chose you, like something found you vulnerable and decided to step through. What makes these stories dangerous is that they're so hard to disprove. You can't run tests on a shadow. You can't interview the entity in the corner. All you can do is survive the night and try to make sense of it in the morning. But what if these stories persist not because of fear, but because they hold fragments of a larger, older truth? A truth science isn't ready to face. Modern neuroscience has an explanation for sleep paralysis. And on the surface, it's simple. When your brain wakes up, but your body doesn't. During REM sleep, your body becomes temporarily paralyzed, a biological safeguard to prevent you from acting out your dreams. Normally, this paralysis lifts as you regain consciousness. But in cases of sleep paralysis, something misfires. The mind becomes alert, but the body stays frozen. You're awake inside a prison of your own skin. The result is terrifying. You can't move, can't speak, and worse, your brain, still in a dreamlike state, begins to hallucinate. Researchers believe this explains the common themes: a heavy pressure on the chest, the sense of a presence in the room, the feeling of being watched. Your brain, half asleep, starts filling in the blanks, and what it fills them with depends on your fears, your culture, your trauma. Someone who grew up hearing stories about demons might see a demon. Someone raised on alien abduction stories might see a gray figure with large black eyes. The hallucination becomes a mirror. But there are cracks in this theory. How do we explain the consistency? Why do people from opposite sides of the world, across centuries, describe the same shadow, the same pressure, the same eyes? Why do so many sufferers report the experience happening repeatedly, always in the same place, often around the same time? Why does it sometimes stop and then return years later, more vivid than before? Science calls these coincidences. Psychology calls them pattern recognition. But for those who experience it, for those who live through it, that's not enough. Because the terror doesn't fade with explanation. You can know what's happening. You can understand the theory. And still, it feels real, visceral, ancient. And sometimes, the science feels like an excuse. A way to close the door without asking what's really knocking. For some, sleep paralysis happens once. A strange, terrifying memory. But for others, it's a recurring nightmare that haunts them for years. Take the story of Maria from Brazil. For months, every time she fell asleep on her back, she'd wake up paralyzed. And always, the same figure. A woman, dressed in black, with long hair covering her face. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just stood there, staring. Maria tried therapy. She tried sleeping pills. Nothing worked. One night, the figure reached out and touched her. Maria didn't sleep for 3 days after that. Then there's Devin, a student in Toronto. His episodes always began the same way. He would hear footsteps in his hallway, slow and deliberate. The door would creak open, and something would crawl onto his bed. Not walk, crawl. It never spoke, never revealed its face, but Devin could feel it breathing. Every episode ended the moment it touched him. Or Ayaka in Japan, who started hearing whispers in an old dialect she couldn't understand. She described the experience as a soul being watched by the dead. The voices grew louder with each episode until one night, she woke up with scratches on her arms. Her doctor said she must have done it in her sleep, but Ayaka's hands had remained at her sides. She couldn't move. These stories aren't rare. They're everywhere, across Reddit forums, inside psychiatric case files, whispered in midnight conversations with people too afraid to tell anyone else. And here's the most disturbing part. The experiences don't always fade after you wake. Some people report seeing the figures later, in mirrors, in corners, just beyond the edge of vision, like something followed them back. Sleep paralysis is supposed to be harmless, a neurological glitch, a trick of the mind. But what if it's not just in your mind? Across cultures, languages, and centuries, one figure keeps showing up. They call him the Hat Man. Always the same, tall, motionless and cloaked in shadow, wearing an old-fashioned wide-brimmed hat. He never speaks, never blinks. He simply watches, from the doorway, from the corner of the room, or standing right over your chest. Thousands of people have described him, from Canada to South Africa, Brazil to the Philippines. They've never met, never read the same books, and yet they saw the same man. Children in the US draw him in crayon, wide-brimmed hat and glowing eyes. Prisoners report seeing him during night terrors. Nurses say comatose patients mumble about him in their sleep. And sometimes they all agree. When the Hat Man comes, something bad is about to happen. In folklore, he goes by many names. In the Middle East, he's linked to the jinn. In Latin America, he's called El Hombre del Sombrero. In Appalachian legends, he's a death omen. Skeptics claim it's pareidolia, the brain making shapes in darkness, or a shared archetype like Jung's shadow. A psychological echo, not a real thing. But then come the stories that don't fit. A man in Berlin who saw the Hat Man hovering over his paralyzed body, then later saw him outside his apartment window, fully awake. A woman in Cairo whose daughter screamed from her bedroom, pointing to the corner, describing the same figure, when she'd never heard of sleep paralysis. A boy in Indonesia who drew the Hat Man before he ever experienced paralysis. Days before his grandfather passed away. These are not just dreams, they're patterns, global, ancient, and chilling. And here's the question that no scientist can answer. Why do so many people see the same figure, wearing the same hat? Science has a name for all of this: sleep paralysis, a phenomenon that occurs when the brain wakes up before the body does. You become aware, but you're still frozen. The mind, trapped between REM sleep and consciousness, begins to panic. In that panic, it starts filling the silence with images, nightmares, hallucinations. It's a glitch, they say, a misfire of the brain. Neurologists point to overactive amygdala responses. Psychologists blame stress, trauma, or irregular sleep cycles. The explanation is clinical, sterile, and seemingly complete. But it doesn't always feel complete, because if sleep paralysis is purely biological, why do people see things they've never been exposed to? Why do children, elders, and people with no history of trauma describe the same patterns, the same figures? If it's just a dream, how do you explain the bruises? Some victims wake up with scratch marks. Others claim objects were moved. One man said he awoke with a nosebleed and found his hallway lights turned on, even though he lives alone. These are anecdotes, yes, but there are too many of them, too spread out, too eerily similar, and so the theories begin. Some say the Hat Man is an interdimensional being, not imagined, but perceived during a rare overlap between sleep and altered states of consciousness. Others believe it's a spiritual entity, feeding off fear, that when your body is paralyzed, your soul is exposed. Ancient texts warned of demons that enter through dreams. In medieval Europe, they called it the incubus. In Japan, kanashibari. In Africa, the devil on your back. Modern science has new names, but the experience, it's timeless. And maybe that's what scares us most. Not the paralysis, not the shadow, but the possibility that both science and superstition are right, just looking through so different windows into the same dark room. For all the stories of demons, shadows, and ancient spirits, the real danger of sleep paralysis may not be what we see. It's what it does to us, silently, over time. Imagine living in fear of going to sleep. Imagine dreading the moment your eyes close, knowing what might be waiting. Not every few months, not once a year, every night. That's the reality for thousands of people. Chronic sufferers, some develop insomnia, others fall into depression, and many never tell anyone, afraid they'll be dismissed, or worse, labeled insane. And when society ignores it, it grows in silence. There's no cure, no guaranteed fix. Doctors offer sleep schedules, melatonin, therapy, but the shadows, they don't follow rules. They come when they want. Some leave forever, others stay for life. The terror of sleep paralysis is not just in the moment, it's in the erosion of safety. The one place we should feel untouchable, our bed, becomes the most vulnerable. It's not the paralysis that haunts people, it's not the shadow, it's the helplessness, the silence, the feeling that something else was in the room with you, and you could do nothing. And that's the part no one prepares you for. We want to believe it's just a brain, just a sleep disorder, just a dream, but deep down, we're not so sure. So the next time you hear someone talk about just sleep paralysis, listen closely, because for them, the night never truly ends.